Yeah, excited to have the opportunity to go to Detroit, playing what I think is, from what I've heard from other coaches, a first-class bowl game and a first-class experience for our players, and that's something that you're always looking for at this time of the year. You have a bowl trip as a reward for a good season. We want to do a great job making sure we have a lot of fun with this for our kids, and then ultimately at the end of the day, we know we're playing a tremendous opponent in Pittsburgh, and Coach Narduzzi and his staff have done a great job for a really long time in developing a really good program, a physical team that plays really, really hard, and we got our work cut out for us that way. So, but excited to get an opportunity to play a Power 4 conference opponent, and like I said, what I believe will be a first-class trip for our kids, and and close to home, a place where our fan base can really have an opportunity to come see us in person, and hopefully make Ford Field feel like a home game.
We're in this era kind of college football fans. It's like playoff or bust. Bowl games are meaningless. Like, what would your retort be to people who say that?
I think that you always want to be able to. Everybody wants to win their last game, right? And I think that's really hard, obviously, without the bowl setup, because you get into a playoff world. There's only one basketball team that really does that. Each and every year. So you want to be able to, in a position where you can have a good culminating experience for your team, and I think a bowl opportunity provides you that opportunity. You ultimately have to start to prepare. Whether you fine line, right? Like, this is the seniors' last game. Win one for the seniors. Do a great job when it comes to that and putting a plan together to go do that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, too, this has got to be viewed as your first game of next season, and just trying to get young players the exposure and the necessary, time that they can, really get a good feel for what that may look like. So, trying to balance that out. I think bowl games are really good. I don't know, throughout the winter month there of December and into early January there, I think that very little time that we get off to sit around, and always is good to be able to catch a game. So,
you mentioned kind of like the first game of next year. The first game of your head coaching career, you won the bowl game. 16 to 17 are obviously great years. A couple years ago, you won in Boca Raton. The next year, you won 11 straight games. Like, how much does that create positive momentum, or is it not really a huge deal at the end of the day?
I think it is. I do. I really do believe that that can create some real steam headed into the off season. I think anybody that's what are you trying to find for an individual player? You're always trying to find small wins and wins that they can build success. Build confidence off of those successes, and then collectively, if you're able to do that as a team, I do think it has a major impact of what the month of January looks like. And I think the month of January, early February is a critical time in the entire calendar year. That's exactly the time that sets the entire table for what the season is going to be. There's a lot of checkpoints between February and obviously where we're sitting today. But my gosh, if you don't do January and February really well, you have no shot in the season. And I think to have a good January and February, it's always great to have some momentum going into that.
Jason, the MAC's a good league. It's always done more with less. But just kind of looking at the big picture, you look at Tim Albin leaving for Charlotte. You look at the numbers UMass is throwing around with their salary pool and NIL. Every offseason, coaches are either leaving for assistant jobs or talking about it. Is this all kind of a wake-up call for the MAC that it's, if you want to play big boy football, you got to kind of step up?
Yeah, the world's changing as we know it. And there's no hiding or dancing around that. I think that, your scheduling has took a complete change over the last 24 months for every school from the top on down. How dollars and cents are shared or not shared has taken a complete turn. How things are viewed have taken a complete turn. So you have to be very fluid in your situation. You have to be able to have open conversations. You have to be, having a optimistic perspective on what it may look like if these things are met, and how you can do that. And the arms race of college football used to be just what your weight room looked like and how that looked, and the aesthetics that maybe go along with that has totally changed to new things. So thankful that we have an administration that we're able to work with and work close with that is willing to have those conversations and continue to try to keep us in a position where we can compete, because everybody else is trying to get to a point in time and to a place where success can be sustained, and we've had sustained success here. So there's a lot of teams trying to get to where we're at. If we're trying to go farther and trying to get to places that we've never been, I mean, in some senses, the only way to do that is to do things you've never done. So challenging time, but like I said, thankful for the administration that they're willing to have these conversations to put us in position to hopefully compete at the level we want to compete at.
Another part of that changing world is the transfer portal. Do you anticipate much movement? Did what we see on the field a few weeks ago, roster-wise, is that what you anticipate we see in a few weeks in Detroit?
Much movement, like very broad, right? You know what I mean? Like you're wherever, however you look at this, from now until next August, there you got rosters of 120 to 125. Some schools that are up in the upper 30s, and that's going to go down to 105. You're going to see roster movement. And roster movement's going to take on a whole new meaning across college football, and how that affects us, what that looks like. Again, very fluid situation, and to speculate and try to comment on that's probably irresponsible on my part. But we'll do the best job we can with the guys that are around and the guys that are going to be here and play. We've had a couple really good days of practice to get a good jump on, just the whole process of this without knowing an opponent. I think knowing the opponent that we have is obviously exciting because, again, it's a tremendous game at a tremendous place, and I know we're going to get a first-class experience for it. So, looking forward to going to competing and putting our kids in a position where they can win a game.
I know winning the MAC is always probably the top goal every year, but to have the opportunity to have 2 power conference wins in a season would be pretty significant. How meaningful do you think that is, just for history's sake, but also kind of the momentum and some of those other things we've talked about?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of external things you can get excited about playing for. The main thing I'm excited about playing for, to be honest with you, is the guys that sit in the front row of those chairs that you're sitting in right now, the senior class that, you're talking about guys that have lived through some really hard moments here at Toledo. You got guys that have went through losing a teammate. You've got guys that have went through COVID. You've got guys that have went through multiple injuries that have taken seasons away from them. You've got guys that have won championships. You've got guys that have lost championships. Their experiences have been, all over the map here, and they've stayed the course, and really viewed prosperity and adversity as the same thing, and they've tried to take lessons from both sides of that and done a good job, and that's all we've really ever asked them to do. So I want to do a great job putting this team in position to help win their last football game. They should leave here with a great memory. I want to then do a great job of having a good 3-week block of practice here where we can really find out what our team is going to be and project what that's going to look like. That may not be what we want it to be, or it may be completely what we want it to be, and then from there, then we have to do a great job of putting a plan together that allows us to go play well next year. So, I think there's so many things that are exciting about this time of year. Some of those external things you mentioned too, very cool opportunities that we have in front of us, but the main focus would be trying to get a win for this senior class and then trying to prepare our team for what it looks like next year.
You mentioned the proximity. Obviously, it doesn't allow for much travel like you guys have done in recent past this time of year, but being able to play in your footprint, that is Detroit, Michigan, obviously a lot of kids on their team are from that area. Just kind of what does that do for an opportunity in terms of just being able to play in Detroit?
Well, the metropolitan area up there has been unbelievable for us from a recruiting standpoint of things. I mean, you can go down a list of great players that have been here and have come through these hallways for the last couple decades, not just since we've been here. So that's part of our footprint recruiting. We want to always be present in that. There's no better way to be present, to have another game and another opportunity there and have a chance to go, do it, like I said, on a national stage against a very good quality opponent.
Yeah, and speaking of Pitt, MAC versus ACC, just having that opportunity to play a Power 4 team, does that kind of add to the excitement of kind of representing this conference up against, an ACC game?
Absolutely. I think it's critically important that, we represent ourselves first and foremost at a really, really high level, and then anybody that's associated with us. We play in a great league that has a lot of parity in it, and there's tough games down the stretch, and to get a chance to go out and play another league in a preseason / early season game or a bowl game, either way. I think that's an awesome opportunity for the notoriety that maybe we're trying to get for our university and for our conference.
Do you know much about Pitt? Have you paid attention much to? I know the game just announced yesterday or whatever.
Yeah, I think that they play an up-tempo style of offense. They've kind of changed it a little bit over the last couple of years that way. Hired a new offensive coordinator that's got some really good ideas on how to play with pace and tempo and do a good job trying to stress the defense, all 53 in the third, and then they'll take their shots down the field that way. I think they've gotten really consistent quarterback play. They've got good playmakers on the peripheral that will allow them to get the ball to their hands and they can make things happen. Defensively, they've always been a stop-the-run team first and then a high-pressure defense in third down scenarios. So, we got to do a good job making sure that, we balance improvement of our own team versus having a really good plan to play a really good team.
Going back to yesterday, I think you were the last MAC team to get their bowl announcement. Were there any anxious moments as you guys are waiting for all the pieces to come together?
Well, I had to watch my kids for 2 hours by myself yesterday at home alone, so there's a lot of anxiety that goes along with that. Add the bowl experience to it. It was a time for me not to screw anything up yesterday for sure. So, but that part of it at least was out of my hands, so I couldn't control that.
How much, obviously, like winning and preparing for the game or whatever is top of mind, but at this time of year with these bowl practices, how much do you enjoy kind of seeing what the younger guys can do and maybe who will be a bigger part of the process next year?
I mean, I think it provides a lot of clarity on what it looks like moving forward because, sometimes you get into the routine of the season. And specifically to teams in the Mid-American Conference, you get into midweek play, and sometimes always their academic calendar's flipped upside down, and Tuesday in the football world might be a Saturday in the real world, and there's so many different things moving. It's hard to wrap your hands around every single thing, and sometimes you have to trust that the younger players are doing what they need to do to improve at football. Now you get into these bowl practices, and they are the second team guys or they are the first team guys if we have practices maybe that our seniors aren't in. Lights are on, and you either have done the work or you haven't. And I think, that can create a little bit of anxiety for some of these young guys at some point in time, but that's good pressure, try to, tighten the screws on them to see what they've been doing. And I think that if we know where we're at, we have an honest assessment of where we're at, then we know how to paint a clear picture on how to fix or to maybe where this could go for them. And I think that those players are owed that. So, I think this is an awesome time for us.
Yeah, it's been a long road, to finally get here. It feels surreal that it's my last game ever as a Rocket, but, I'm motivated. I know the team's motivated. We want to finish this out with a win, and, I want to go out, with a good feeling.
Have you watched Pitt much yet? Or?
I've seen him play throughout the year. I haven't sat down and, dove into the film yet. Like Coach Kendall said, they're good on offense. They're up tempo. They want to spread us out and get the ball in their playmakers' hands, and that's something we're gonna have to focus on stopping.
What's the morale of the team like coming off 2 losses, and now that you've got that target and know what the next mission is, so to speak, has that morale kind of lifted in the last 24 hours?
Yeah. 2 back-to-back losses. That's tough to swallow, but that's something we need to move on from and focus on Pitt and focus on improving what we need to improve to, go out and win.
You mentioned obviously this is the final game for you guys and seniors obviously on this team. Just in terms of that approach, knowing that this is the final chapter of your career and your guys' career, just kind of how would you describe kind of how you guys have come together and approaching this game knowing it's the final one?
Yeah, Coach Kendall says it all the time that, you always want to go out on a win. I think the young guys have done a great job of, getting behind us and really rallying and, focusing up and doing what needs to be done in order to put us in a position to win this last game.
Detroit, obviously, you guys are familiar with, obviously you've been there before. Just how does that add, obviously, proximity, guys on the team that are from that area, just how does that add to the excitement for this game?
Yeah, we're all fired up. My family's going to be able to make it. My whole family's going to be able to make the drive up. It's not like we got to go across country. There's a ton of guys on the team from Ohio and Michigan that are right there, so we're expecting, a bunch of our families to be able to get there, be able to have them watch us play for one last time. Obviously Rocket Nation's right here, so, hopefully they can make that trip right up 75 and get to the game.
Having played at Ford Field the last couple of years in the championship game, does that give you guys an advantage knowing what that setup is like, knowing where the play clocks are, knowing where the locker room and that type of stuff is?
Yeah, obviously playing there the last 2 years, we are familiar with it. We know how the locker room setup is. We know what we need to do to be able to play well there. So I do think it can be an advantage for us.
What do you need to do to play well there?
Start fast. We haven't started fast, the past couple games, and I think it's come back to haunt us a little bit. But I think being able to start fast and finish the games the way we need to is going to be huge for us.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, like you said, we were able to beat Mississippi State earlier in the year, and get another chance to do it again later in the year is awesome. And in the bowl, in a bowl setting. So.
Just to have obviously this time, more practices, just more time with the team, just kind of how does that kind of add to the season and obviously what you guys looking for?
Yeah, obviously, like we're done with our regular season here, so it's like what Coach Kendall said is he views this as the beginning of next season, and that's exactly how we treat it. I mean, these practices, these bowls practices, they're about getting the Toledo Rockets better, and so that's what we really try to do when we go out there is just get ourselves better.
When you come to bowl games like this, there's always a question about motivation. Having this game in your backyard and against a Power 4 school, does that help bring up the Rockets for this game?
Yeah, I would think so. Like we said, we got a lot of Detroit guys on our team. I know they're excited to kind of be back in their hometown and have all their, friends and family come to the game. So, everybody kind of wants to put on a show in that aspect. And then, like we said earlier, like you play a Power 4 opponent, like you want to go show them that you can compete with these teams. So, yeah, there's definitely some extra motivation there.
Do you feel like there's going to be any difference? Obviously, you guys have been able to travel the last couple of years. This one's right up the road. I mean, do you feel like there's much of a difference not, going anywhere, or is it more of a kind of
I think it'll be a little colder than the years past. But other than that, I mean, I've heard this bowl game is great. They do great activities with us and everything. So from that aspect, no, I don't think there'll be much difference.
Were you feeling any anxiousness yesterday as all these other MAC games were being announced and you guys had to wait to hear yours?
No, so I follow along pretty closely to all the projections and everything. And so I know, like, Brett McMurphy, like he releases a new one like twice a day, and he for the most part had us in the Detroit Bowl. So I just kind of assumed that that's where we were going to go, and then we got the notification around 3 or whatever that's what it was, and it was against Pitt. So.
Have you had much chance to study Pitt's defense?
I got in here a little bit last night and watched them. Just kind of took the clicker, didn't really write much down, just kind of trying to get myself familiar with it. But this upcoming week for sure, I'll definitely get in more in depth.
How much do these practices, I know you guys prefer games over practice probably, but when you do have just 2 solid weeks or whatever it is, just how much, thinking back to last season, preparing for Wyoming, do you feel like you just get so much better?
I do, yeah. I think we get a lot of good individual work that we don't maybe necessarily get during the season because everything's so focused on, preparing for the upcoming opponent. So really being able to focus on your own work and what you need to do to get better as a football player and what we need to do to get better as a team, the improvement it's great.
I know you just found out the opponent yesterday, but if there was one word to describe the practices so far after the regular season finale, what would that be?
I think we've been motivated. Obviously, no one wants to lose. No one wants to lose 3 straight in the season. You want to win one in the season. So I think there is definitely motivation there to finish the season with a win.